So this video we're going to be looking at the 206 by 13. I think a lot of people's got confusions on the 206 by 13, and so we're going to question, is it really that different? So what we've got is we've got a modern 206 by 13 in a size 14. We've got an original Sanger 206 by 13, and then we've got a Sanger oscillating hook style 15 by 1. All these are 14s. So we're going to take a look at all of them, and then we're going to go to the original twin needle for a 206 by 13. Now this is Sanger 306 319. So we're going to take a look at it. We're going to magnify it in here and show you a little bit of difference in some of these. But so right here is your standard original Sanger Samco needle for an oscillating hook. Then you got your Sanger Samco 206 by 13 needle. This one's a 15 by 1 original needle, and so we're going to show you just what's really been changed on these needles. So the new one is pretty much the same. The tip is pretty close. It looks a little bit longer, but the biggest change is the scarfs in the back here. The original needles did not have that. So all Sanger was doing is they were taking original 15 by 1, shortening the tip. So you could easily fabricate a 206 by 13 by shortening the tip and resharpening it, because up here we got the same length up here, we got the same length here, and the only length difference is here. So they've basically shortened this down very little. So they took off this main tip right here. They've brought off about that much. So you could easily take a wore down 15 by 1, sand this tip off right here and shorten the tip. The rest of the needle's going to be the same up here. Now the biggest thing with the modern needles is they're putting these scarfs in, and they work fine for regular sewing, but if you get to pulling through a lot of layers, this thread's going to be pulled real tight right here. You're going to have all this missing area for the thread to tuck itself into as the hook's coming past. So if it's pulled really tight, it can easily skip because there's not a loop. You're making a loop on the bottom down here. Where these, it's going to be harder for the thread to hide from the hook because you've got all this metal here. So if you get a lot of skip stitches, a lot of times it's this scarf giving you problems. The old ones, they put a little cut right here but they still left enough metal on the side where it could come through and pick it off. And here your thread can slide out the sides where it can tuck real close to the needle in all this missing metal. So if you're trying to figure out why your 306 or 319 is skipping, it's due to this little scarf right here. These you can go through a lot more layers where there's no scarf missing. So Sanger wasn't modifying their original needles to the scarf. So now we know the scarf was being made later, toward the end of the 60s, early 70s. So in 53 and in the 50s, when they were designing the early rotaries, they were just taking a 15x1 needle and just shaving off the tip and sharpening it back down. So you could easily take a 15x1 and sharpen it down and make your own needles if you had to, because everything up here's the same. They didn't do no chopping up here. And this is how Singer was quickly able to make a needle for their new machines without hardly any alterations, by just shaving off this little tip right here and resharpening the needle. You could have a whole bunch of needles. So the new ones, they're putting these scarves in here, and it's causing skip stitches because your thread gets in here and it gets under this little scarf, and the needle, as it comes all the way down, pulls the thread, and it makes it really far away from the hook. So as the hook's going past, sometimes it'll jump right past the thread. The thread will tuck itself right up against this, especially if you're using really thin, fine thread. Different thread will act differently. So this is one of the issues with trying to update an old machine. It's the way these scarves are being made here. The older Singers was running without scarves, so it was making it easier for the hook to pick the thread up. So if you're having issues with that, you'll have to go back to an old style needle, and you'll have to go back to rethinking the needle. So a lot of people's having issues with that. And another thing is the scarf weakens the needle right here. So if you're having a whole lot of needle breakage, this scarf is weakening the needle because you're missing all this metal in the out of the back right here, and it's making it really thin, and they're snapping off right here above the eye in this scarf. So this scarf is pretty much your breaking point, where it's going to break, snap, and it makes it harder to penetrate tougher fabrics. So if you're having these kind of issues, you may have to go to a modern machine that uses modern needles, where the scarf and the hook comes closer together, because the old machines they designed them to use this style of needle. So if you're coming into issues with problems with your sewing machine, a lot of times it's the redesign of the hook and the needle. But the needle is mainly your biggest issue with the new machines. New machines be using these scarves with their rotary hooks. The old ones, the gap was wider, the needle was thicker, and they didn't break, and the hook could pick the thread up because there was more metal there and it was closer. Where this is letting your thread tuck itself up behind the needle and let the hook go past without catching it. So if you're really hitting some thick fabric, it'll be your biggest issue running a vintage machine. But there is no difference between a 206 and a regular oscillating hook other than this tip being cut. And you can easily take a piece of sandpaper or a sharpening stone, take the tip off of a used needle, bring it on down, and round it off, sharpen it, and use one. So if you have a bunch of used needles and you've got a lot of extra time on your hands, you can use a sharpening stone or a piece of sandpaper and take this needle down and sharpen it and polish it on a piece of leather, and just reuse your needles as long as they're not bent. But there's not a whole lot of difference other than the tip and the scarf. So that's what you're going to be dealing with on the new needles. You're going to have a scarf here, but your old needles ain't going to have the scarf. They're going to be a thick solid shank right here with just a little bitty indention on it. So this is where everything's changing, is on the tip and where the scarf's at. And another thing is, if you have a lot of broken needles, you need to check the play in your needle bar. Needle bars will wear out. The upper arm will wear out where the hole's drilled in the frame of the arm of the machine. It'll wear down and you'll get slack in the needle bar and it'll move from side to side. So anytime you're running a vintage machine, you need to check your needle bar for warpage, being slightly bent, and you need to check the play in your needle bar. So a lot of people's talking about breaking a lot of needles, going through a lot of needles. It could be due to this scarf, or it could be due to your needle bar, or the holes that the needle bar goes through that holds and guides the needle bar in the upper arm of the frame. So if they're wore out, you're going to have a whole lot of play in your needle. And the only way of fixing some of that is changing a needle bar, or having a needle bar hole shimmed, having it drilled out and a shim put inside the hole to tighten the needle bar up so it doesn't move from side to side, because the needle bar will get loose, and if you grab a hold of it with your fingers, you can wiggle the needle side to side and you can feel the play in the needle bar. A good machine won't have no play as you wiggle the bar back and forth with the needle in the clamp. So it's things to check when running a vintage machine. That's tricks and tips on some of that.